The waiter who carried music inside his silence, "Could you move?" The woman didn't even look at him when she said it. Her hand waved casually in Elijah's direction like she was chasing away dust, not speaking to a human being. Elijah froze for a moment, just a second, barely enough for anyone to notice. But inside him, that second stretched, twisted, and pulled at something deep, something tired. Then he lowered his eyes, nodded softly, and stepped aside without a word. It was easier that way. He had learned that silence protected him better than anything else in this world. The restaurant was glowing with warm lights and clinking glasses, a place where everyone seemed to have a story except him. Elijah moved between tables like a ghost, present but unseen, helpful but unnoticed. His hands were gentle, practiced, careful. Not a single plate rattled when he carried them. Not a single glass shook. He worked like someone who didn't want to disturb the world around him, because the world had already disturbed him enough. He wiped the table slowly, the warm cloth brushing against the wood, the soft jazz playing above him blending with the murmurs of people who never knew his name. They called him hey, they called him waiter, and sometimes, when they were irritated or careless, they called him nobody. That one hurt more than any other. But Elijah never reacted, not because he was weak, but because he had learned to hide the strongest parts of himself, the parts the world had once crushed. As he walked toward the back, something stopped him. Not a person, not a voice, just a sound, soft, hollow, heavy, the sound of a piano key being tapped accidentally by a passing waiter. The grand piano in the corner sat untouched, beautiful, polished, quiet. Most people never even looked at it, but Elijah did. Every time he passed it, every time he heard even the faintest note shake in the air, something inside him trembled like someone had knocked on a locked door in his chest. He used to have a piano once. He used to have music. He used to have a mother who sat beside him every evening, whispering, "Baby, one day people will listen to you, not ignore you." But that was before the fire. Before the night everything burned, their house, their piano, their laughter, their life. Before Elijah stood in a hospital hallway holding his mother's bracelet because it was the only thing the fire didn't take. He blinked fast. He couldn't cry here, not where people looked at tears like weakness. "Elijah," the manager's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He turned. The manager looked panicked, sweating through his shirt. "We've got a disaster," he whispered. "The hired pianist canceled last minute. The owner is losing it. People are waiting for the performance. If we don't fix this, the night is ruined." Elijah's heart thumped once, loud, like a hand hitting the inside of his chest. His eyes drifted toward the piano, but only for a second. The manager didn't see it. He only sighed and said the one sentence that sliced Elijah open in a place he still hadn't healed. "We need someone. Anyone, even a nobody." And for the first time in years, Elijah felt something inside him rise instead of break. Elijah didn't answer the manager. He just stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of that last word echo inside his chest like someone had thrown a stone down a deep, empty well. Nobody. People used to call him a prodigy once, a miracle child, a boy whose fingers danced on piano keys like they were made of light. But the world had a way of forgetting miracles when life got hard. The manager rushed away to handle angry customers, leaving Elijah standing alone in the hallway, frozen, breathing slow, trapped between the person he used to be and the person everyone now believed he was. He leaned against the wall, pressing the heel of his hand against his eyes as memories pushed their way up like water breaking through a cracked dam. He saw himself at 10 years old, feet barely touching the piano pedals, his mother sitting beside him on their small couch, clapping softly, eyes glowing with pride. "You're going to make people feel things, baby," she always said. "Not because you play perfect, but because you play honest." Honest. The world had taken too much from him for honesty to survive. He remembered the night of the fire, the screaming, the smoke clawing into his lungs, the sound of wood cracking like bones breaking. He remembered running barefoot into the street, coughing, crying, turning back as flames swallowed the window where the piano once stood. That piano had been his voice, his dream, his childhood, his home. And when the firefighters pulled him away, he wasn't crying because of the flames. He was crying because he could still hear the piano keys in his head, and he knew he would never hear them again for real. He hadn't touched a piano since that night. Not once. Not when the social worker asked him what he loved. Not when his mother's picture was lowered into the ground. Not when life pushed him into a corner and told him to survive. Not when customers called him boy, hey, or nobody. Music scared him now. Not because he forgot how to play, but because he remembered too much. And yet, as he stepped back into the dining room, something felt different. He saw the grand piano sitting quietly under the golden lights, its surface glowing like a memory trying to breathe. People murmured impatiently, waiting for the entertainer who would never come. The air was thick with irritation, tapping fingers, rolling eyes, the sound of forks hitting empty plates, and through all of that noise, Elijah felt something he hadn't felt in years, a pull, a calling, a whisper from the past, his mother's voice, soft, warm, certain. One day, baby, people will listen. His hands trembled as he walked closer, not toward a table, not toward a spill, not toward the kitchen, but toward the piano. Every step felt like walking back into the fire he had spent half his life running from. Behind him, a waiter muttered, "Where's he going?" Another whispered, "He better not touch that thing." A customer laughed. The waiter, "Please, he's nobody." Elijah stopped beside the piano, his reflection shining faintly in the glossy black surface. The room didn't know it yet, but they were seconds away from hearing a truth he had buried in silence for years. Elijah stood beside the piano, breathing slowly, as if the air around him had turned thicker, heavier, almost alive. The room buzzed with noise, forks scraping plates, chairs shifting, voices rising in irritation, but none of that reached him. It all faded like someone had turned down the volume of the world. All he heard was his heartbeat, slow, deep, almost trembling, like it knew what he was about to do before he admitted it to himself. He lifted one hand and hovered it above the piano's smooth surface. His fingers shook, not from fear of the people watching, but from the memory of the last time he touched something like this, that night. The fire, the sound of the piano cracking under heat, the scream of wood giving up, his mother's voice shouting his name. His hand fell back to his side. He couldn't do it. He told himself that. He believed it for years. Hey! A voice snapped from behind him. A customer. Annoyed, loud, dismissive, the waiters blocking the view. "Can someone move him?" The words felt like a slap, not because of the insult, but because they pulled him out of the memory he'd been trapped in for so long. He stepped back instinctively, but his eyes didn't leave the piano. Across the room, the owner argued with the manager, waving his arms angrily. "Where is the entertainer? People paid for a performance. This is a disaster." The manager whispered something Elijah couldn't hear. The owner's face tightened, his frustration building like a storm. Eyes swung toward Elijah. For a moment, he thought they were about to shout at him too. But something else happened instead. A child, a little girl in a yellow dress, walked up to him with a soft smile. She tugged on his apron gently. "Mister," she said quietly, "why are you sad?" Elijah blinked. No one asked him that. Not customers. Not coworkers. Certainly not strangers. He felt his throat tighten. "I'm not sad," he whispered. The girl tilted her head. "But your eyes look tired." "My mommy says tired eyes mean a tired heart." Her words hit him deeper than anything said that night. Before he could answer, she pointed to the piano. "Can you play? You look like someone who knows how." Elijah felt the entire room disappear for a moment. A child's honesty had done what adult cruelty never could. It cracked the wall he had built around his music. He swallowed, his voice barely more than breath. "I used to." She smiled softly. "Then maybe you should again." He looked at the piano. Really looked. And something long buried under ashes and fear and grief flickered inside him. A small flame. A tiny spark. A reminder that his music wasn't dead. It was waiting. He pulled the bench out slowly. The sound scraped through the silent room like a whisper turning into thunder. People turned. Forks froze. Chairs stopped moving. Even the owner paused mid-sentence. The entire restaurant watched as Elijah sat down at the piano. For the first time since the night his world burned, Elijah's fingers hovered above the keys like they were touching fire. He hadn't played in years. So many years that he sometimes wondered if the music inside him had died with the piano that burned and the mother he lost in the flames. Now, sitting here in front of strangers who didn't know his story, didn't know his pain, didn't know what this moment meant, his hands trembled like they remembered all the hurt before his mind did. The restaurant grew quiet, slowly, like someone was turning down the noise with invisible hands. Conversations faded. Forks stopped moving. Even the air felt still, heavy, thick, holding its breath. People didn't know what was happening. They just felt it, that something was happening. Elijah closed his eyes, and suddenly, he was 10 again, sitting on a wooden stool in a tiny living room filled with laughter. The scent of cornbread in the air, his mother humming beside him as she turned pages of his music notebook. "Play what you feel, baby," she used to whisper. "Not what the world expects." He pressed the first key. Just one. A soft, fragile note floated through the restaurant, so delicate it felt like it could break midair. People blinked. Some leaned forward without realizing. A waitress stopped pouring a drink and just stared. Elijah felt his heart jump. The sound wasn't perfect. It wasn't loud, but it was alive, and that alone made his throat tighten. He pressed another key. Then another. Each note felt like a memory pulled straight from the ashes, pieces of a childhood he thought he'd never touch again. His hands shook at first, the fear pulling at him, trying to drag him back into silence. But something else pushed back, something warm, something painful, something true. His mother's voice, her smile, her belief in him. His hands steadied, and then he began to play. Not with confidence. No, not yet. But with truth, with raw, shaky emotion, with the kind of honesty his mother always told him to protect. The melody that formed was simple, soft, almost shy, but it carried weight, heavy with grief, gentle with hope, trembling with a man trying to find himself again. The owner of the restaurant stopped shouting and stood frozen. Customers who once rolled their eyes now stared with parted lips. Even the staff, who never looked at Elijah twice, felt something tug at their hearts. The little girl in the yellow dress sat cross-legged on the floor beside the piano, smiling like she'd known all along. But the moment Elijah's hands remembered how to move freely, his past remembered how to hurt. A sound, a crash, echoed from the kitchen, sharp and sudden. Elijah's fingers slipped, his breath caught, a flicker of trauma shot through him, fast, violent, like fire crawling up a wall. His vision blurred. The room spun. The old memory he tried so hard to bury clawed its way back. His mother screaming his name through the smoke. He pulled his hands away from the keys as if burned. The music stopped. The room froze. And Elijah, the man they called nobody, whispered in a shaking voice the truth he never said out loud. "I'm scared." The room stayed frozen long after the last note disappeared. It was as if the entire restaurant exhaled at the same time and realized delayed they had been holding their breath. Elijah sat there with his hands shaking above the keys, his chest rising too quickly, his eyes glassy and distant, not looking at the piano, not looking at the people, not looking at anything in the room. He wasn't here anymore. He was somewhere else, somewhere he'd spent years trying not to return to. The night of the fire. He heard it before he saw it, the crackling, hungry sound of flames chewing through wood. He smelled the smoke before it filled the room, thick and bitter like burnt plastic. He felt the heat before he understood danger. At first, he thought someone left the oven on. Then he saw the orange glow spreading across the living room wall where the piano stood. He remembered screaming for his mom, hearing her shout back from the kitchen, "Get outside. I'm right behind you." He remembered running barefoot, lungs burning, eyes stinging, coughing so hard his chest hurt. And then, the moment that broke something inside him forever, he heard her fall, a heavy, terrifying thud, followed by silence. His 10-year-old body turned back toward the house even as the fire roared louder, even as neighbors pulled him away, even as their hands bruised his arms, holding him back. They told him it wasn't safe. They told him the roof was caving in. They told him she was gone, but he never accepted it. He never forgave himself for running, and he never touched a piano again. Elijah. A soft voice snapped him out of the nightmare. The little girl in the yellow dress was still sitting by his bench. Her eyes were wide, filled with concern too pure for her age. "You're shaking," she whispered. Elijah blinked, the room returning slowly, but his breath was still caught halfway between the present and the memory. The manager rushed up, panic back in his voice. "Elijah, stop. What are you doing? This is embarrassing. You can't just sit here like that. You're here to clean tables." Not. But before he could finish, the owner raised a hand sharply. "Quiet." Everyone looked at him. The owner stepped closer to Elijah, confusion and shock in his expression. But behind that, something softer, something unexpected. "That wasn't a beginner's play," the owner said quietly. "That was someone who lived their music." Elijah swallowed hard. "I haven't played in a long time. Why did you stop?" the owner asked gently. Elijah wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to catch his breath, but his voice cracked anyway. "Because the last time I played," he paused, fighting the words, "my mom was still alive." The room felt like it tilted. A wave of silence rolled through the tables. Even the manager lowered his head. The owner stared at Elijah, not with authority, not with judgment, but with the raw, human realization that he was standing in front of a man carrying a broken world inside him. But the owner wasn't the only one watching. At a table near the back, an older woman, one Elijah had never seen before, sat with her hand covering her mouth. Her eyes were full of tears, and in her trembling fingers, she held something Elijah thought he'd never see again, his mother's charm bracelet. Elijah stared at the bracelet like the world had been punched out of him. He blinked once, then again, but the image didn't fade. The silver heart charm, the tiny engraved D and M, the small dent on the side from when he dropped it as a child, it was all real. It was her bracelet, his mother's. His breathing stopped somewhere between his chest and throat. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't understand why something that belonged to the dead was glowing softly under the restaurant's lights in the hands of a stranger. The older woman stood slowly, her chair scraping the floor. People turned to look at her, but she didn't care. Her eyes were locked on Elijah, watery, shaking, breaking with a memory she never thought she'd confront again. "Elijah," she whispered. His knees almost gave out. No one had said his name like that since his mother died. Gently, lovingly, like it carried a story behind it. The manager frowned, confused. "Ma'am, do you know our waiter?" But she didn't answer him. She stepped closer, holding the bracelet against her chest like she was afraid it might disappear if she blinked. "I never thought I'd see you again," she said, her voice trembling on every word. "You were so small, so scared. I held you outside that night while they tried to save your mother." Elijah's heart slammed so hard he grabbed the piano to steady himself. "You." His voice cracked, thin as paper. "You were there, that night." She nodded, tears finally spilling. "I was the neighbor who pulled you from the smoke. I was the one who wrapped you in a blanket. And when they carried you away, crying for your mother, this," she lifted the bracelet, fell from her wrist. "I kept it for years, hoping one day I could return it." The room was dead silent. Even the waiters stopped moving. Even the customers forgot their meals. The music system hummed quietly, but no one heard it. Elijah took a step toward her, eyes drowning in memory. "I tried to go back in," he said, voice shaking, "but they held me back. I thought she was right behind me." The woman cried harder. "She was, Elijah. She tried to reach you. She got so close." But the roof collapsed before she could make it through the doorway. His face crumpled. A soft gasp tore from his chest, the kind that comes from a wound carried too long. The woman reached out her hand. "You didn't leave her," she whispered. "You didn't fail her. She died trying to reach you. Not the piano, not the house. You." Something inside Elijah broke open. The blame he carried, the guilt he wore like skin, the pain that shaped every silent day of his life. It all cracked under the weight of the truth. He pressed a hand over his mouth, the tears finally rising, but before he could say another word, the restaurant doors burst open. A man rushed inside, wide-eyed, breathless, holding a newspaper with Elijah's picture printed on the front page. "Elijah," he shouted, "you need to see this. People are looking for you. Everyone." The restaurant erupted. Elijah froze the moment he saw the newspaper in the man's shaking hands. His own face, the face of a waiter people called nobody, the face that never lifted higher than a tray, was printed on the front page. The ink hadn't even fully dried. It still smelled sharp, like fresh truth being released into the world. The man rushed forward, breathless. "You don't know me," he said, "but I was at the open mic downtown last night. Someone recorded you. Someone filmed you playing outside the shelter." A whisper ran through the room. People turned their heads, eyes widening. Elijah blinked. I never played there." "Yes," the man said softly, "you did. Or at least, a piece of you did." He unfolded the paper. On the front page was a story about a young black boy who used to play piano on street corners with his mother. A child people donated to. A child people loved hearing. A child whose music once made strangers pause in the middle of their busy lives and smile. The article called him the Lost Street Pianist. Someone had found an old video, grainy, shaky, shot years ago, of Elijah as a kid playing his heart out on a broken keyboard outside a grocery store. His mother sat on a crate beside him, clapping, cheering, loving him louder than the traffic rolling behind them. Gasps filled the restaurant, soft and rising like a wave. Elijah's breath caught. That video. He hadn't seen it since before the fire. His mother's laughter echoed faintly from the speakers of the man's phone as the video played. Her voice sang, "Play from your heart, baby." His tiny hands dancing on the keys. The innocence, the joy, the hope. The Elijah of today felt like a stranger to the Elijah of that video. A man carrying grief instead of music, silence instead of dreams. The older woman with the bracelet covered her mouth with both hands, tears streaming as she recognized the moment, the street, the keyboard, the mother she couldn't save. The little girl in the yellow dress whispered, "Is that really you?" Elijah's throat tightened. That was before everything changed. The owner stepped closer, the first hint of awe appearing in his eyes. "You weren't just a pianist," he said quietly. "You were born for this." But right then, right when the room finally saw him, the manager stormed forward, face twisted with panic and fear. "No, absolutely not. This is getting out of control," he snapped. "He's a waiter, not an artist. He works under me. He doesn't get to just..." But he didn't get another word out, because the door opened again. Slowly, quietly, and a tall man in a long coat stepped inside, carrying a leather folder. The room went still. The man looked directly at Elijah as if he had been searching for him for years. "Elijah Brooks," he said calmly. "I'm with the city's Cultural Arts Foundation." He opened the folder. Inside was a formal document, thick, embossed, official. "We've been looking for you. Your mother registered you in a scholarship program before she died, and it's finally been activated." Elijah stared, hands trembling. The man smiled softly. "You still have a future in music." And tonight proved it. The room gasped again. The manager fell silent. The owner stepped back. The older woman sobbed harder. But Elijah, he felt his entire world tilt. A scholarship. For him. After all these years. After all this pain. The man lowered the folder. "But before we go further," he said gently, "you need to know something else." Elijah swallowed. "What?" The man took a breath. "The person who funded the scholarship. The one who made sure it stayed waiting for you." He stepped aside, revealing someone standing directly behind him. Elijah's knees almost gave out, because it was a face he never thought he would see. His mother's sister, the aunt he thought had abandoned him. Elijah stared at the woman standing behind the arts official, his breath caught in the middle of his chest. She looked older now, lines around her eyes, silver streaks in her hair, but there was no mistaking the soft brown eyes, the familiar structure of her face. the way her hands trembled as if they were trying to reach into the past and pull him out. Aunt Lydia. He whispered. The name felt strange on his tongue. Forgotten. Dusty. Buried somewhere between the fire, the funerals, the foster homes, the lonely nights, and the silence that had become his companion for years. Her face folded with emotion as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Oh, baby," she said in a broken voice, "you grew up without me. I tried to find you. They moved you from home to home. I never stopped searching." Elijah felt his world sway, everything inside him softening and hurting at the same time. "I thought you left me," he whispered. "I thought I had no one." Lydia took one trembling step forward. "I never left you," she said, her voice cracking. "I was late that night. I should have been there. I should have taken you. I should have protected you the way your mama asked me to. I failed you, but I never stopped loving you." The bracelet in her hand shimmered under the chandelier light. The same bracelet his mother wore the night she died. Something inside Elijah finally broke. Not the painful break, but the break that comes right before healing. He took the last step toward her, and Lydia wrapped her arms around him with the kind of hug that fills the empty places inside a person, the hug he had needed since the night everything burned. People watched in stunned silence. The customers, the waiters, the owner, even the manager, whose mouth hung open as if realizing he had been mistreating not a nobody, but a broken boy who carried a whole world of pain behind his quiet eyes. When they finally pulled apart, the arts official stepped forward. "Elijah," he said gently, "your mother named you for a reason. She believed you had a gift that could change people. She made sure your talent wouldn't die with her." He held out the scholarship document. "It's yours, fully funded. Music school, training, performances, everything. You just have to say yes." Elijah looked at the paper, then at the piano, then at the little girl in the yellow dress still watching him with hope, then at his aunt, and finally, he looked at his own trembling hands. Hands that once played, hands that once feared, hands that just brought an entire restaurant to silence. "I want it," Elijah whispered. "For her, for me." The owner stepped forward slowly, voice low with respect. "If you ever want a place to play," he said, "this piano, this stage, this place, is yours." The restaurant erupted in soft applause. Not the loud kind, not the showy kind, but the kind that comes from people who just witnessed something sacred. Elijah sat back at the piano, not because someone asked him to, not because he felt forced, not because he was proving anything, but because, for the first time since the fire, he wanted to. He placed his hands on the keys, took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and played. Not with fear, not with pain, but with love. The room filled with music so soft it felt like forgiveness, so warm it felt like someone lighting a candle in the dark, so honest it felt like his mother was sitting beside him, again whispering, "Play what you feel, baby." Tears fell freely, not just his, but from every corner of the room. And when the last note hung in the air like a prayer finally answered, Elijah lifted his head, not as a waiter, not as a nobody, but as the boy his mother believed in, the boy the world lost, the man the world just rediscovered. Moral: some people aren't ignored because they are small, they are ignored because the world is too busy to notice their light, until the day their light becomes impossible to hide.